Alright everybody, so in this video we're going to look at Linux. Specifically we're going to be using Metasploitable 2. Metasploitable 2 is, let me get in here, press the space bar, there we go. It is a version of Ubuntu. It's a server, so it's probably one of the Ubuntu servers. And Metasploitable is obviously, from the name of it, it is an intentionally vulnerable Linux operating system. And they designed it to be like this so that you can practice your Metasploit skills. So let's say you could not get your hands on a Windows machine or whatever. I mean, there's many resources available, so you should definitely be able to get access to a Windows VM or whatever without any issues. But let's say for whatever reason you couldn't. Metasploitable 2, which is what we're going to use. There's the first version of Metasploitable, then there's the second one, and we're going to use the second one. The second one has way more vulnerabilities available, and also it has web application stuff that you can use. So you can practice some SQL injection or cross-site scripting, just a whole bunch of other things. So anyhow, those are all topics that we're not going to get into with the Metasploit course. But anyways, Metasploitable 2 is free. It's open source. Obviously anything Linux is open source, but you can download it from SourceForge and whoever else is hosting it. So anyhow, when you download it, it's a zip file, and it's going to actually have a VM file, and you're going to import that, or you're going to open that up in VMware or VirtualBox. And I think they made it specifically for VMware, but anyhow, you don't actually go through a process of installing it. You more likely just import it, because it's they created Metasploitable inside of a VM, and then they exported it. So all you need to do is import it. Anyhow, I'm just running 512 megabytes of RAM. Linux does not require a lot of RAM, especially when you have a command line interface like this. There's no graphical interface like Windows. You boot into the desktop. It's nothing like that with Metasploitable. So we don't need that much RAM to run it, which is also another thing, another good thing. And like I say, we can practice our Metasploit skills. And the fact that it's Linux, hey, cool. It's just kind of a good tool to use for our Linux video. Oh man, so a lot of talking. Just like in Windows 7, if we cannot directly use a 0-day or exploit the actual operating system itself, then we need to attack the services that are running on the system. Or we need to get the user to generate, or we need to generate a payload and have them use it. So we did that in Windows 7. We generated some payloads and explored that a little bit more. And so now we're going to going back to Linux. We're going to actually be using some vulnerable services. So we're not going to do any payloads in this video. So a couple things that I want to talk about real quick with Metasploitable. The default login, if I exit out of this, it's going to log me out. There we go. So the default login is MSFadmin, and the password is MSFadmin. Now there are multiple logins, and so you can kind of play with this, and when you practice your Metasploit skills, you might be able to discover other logins and that sort of thing, kind of go around the system and see what's on there, see if you can discover any files with usernames, passwords, or hashes. It's all in there. And we can see it says to access official Ubuntu documentation, so we know it's Ubuntu. It also tells you that 2.6.24 says that it's a server, so it's most probably an Ubuntu server. So we can also do a uname and then a -r, and it will tell us 2.6.24 and so forth. But anyways, that's all we really need to do with Metasploitable. Now, of course, we need to be on the network. Now, MSFadmin is an admin, but it's not the root account. And because it's not a root account, we have to use a command called sudo. Sudo will execute as a super user, and it requires us to type in the password, but it's going to execute things with root privileges. So let's do a sudo /etc/network/interfaces. It's going to ask the password, MSF. Actually, you know what? We needed to do a nano. So let me get out of that real quick. Sudo nano, because we want to edit. If we don't do the sudo and we just do the nano, it will still let you open the file, but when you make your changes and go to save, it won't let you save. So make sure you do the sudo nano /etc/network/interfaces, MSFadmin for the password. And I leave everything stock. I don't change anything just in case I mess something up. And obviously you can see that I have a pound symbol or a hashtag lab. Everything underneath this I've added. So iFace, ETH0, iNet static. I want a static IP. This is the address I want. That's the net mask I want. And there's the gateway. So if you need to pause this video, go ahead and do that. And you can duplicate those settings. Of course, when you make any changes, we're going to press Control X. It's going to ask you if you want to save it, hit the Y key, and it's going to ask you what name to save it under. Just hit Enter to keep the original name. So sometimes Metasploitable has issues with starting up the interfaces. So if I do an ifconfig, it will let me view this, but to actually let's say that you have nothing, because there's a chance where it may not show you anything. And what you would need to do is you would need to do a sudo ifconfig up, or ETH0 up. There we go. And if you don't put the sudo command, it's going to tell you that you don't have the privileges to do so. So you need to make sure that you use the sudo command ifconfig ETH0 up. If you do an ifconfig and that ETH0 is up, but let's say you don't have an IP address, maybe it just has an iNet6 address, IPv6 address. Well, we need to manually tell it ifconfig, we need to do a sudo ifconfig ETH0 and then the IP address. So I just did .1.111. I know in our interfaces file I had it at 120, but since I'm manually asking for an IP address, I'm just going to do 1.111. So you just hit Enter, and that should give you your IP address. You can confirm it by just doing another ifconfig, and you should be good to go. Now, the reason I'm showing you that way is because a lot of times if you reboot, like I said, it has issues with the interfaces sometimes, and so you may have to manually ask it for an IP address. Now, after a couple of minutes, occasionally it will drop the IP address. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it does, all you need to do is just redo that sudo ifconfig ETH0 and then the IP address. Finally, we're going to go to a terminal and we're going to ping it 192.168.1.111, and I'm getting replies back. So our machines are talking, everything's cool, awesome. Otherwise we wouldn't get any work done. So just like anything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a db_nmap. We're going to do a -pr -lowercase-sn, and the subnet, actually let me do a -v for both, 192.168.0 or .1.0/24. And we're going to let that scan, and hopefully it'll find our host on there. Alright, and it looks like it's finishing up here, but if we scroll up and look for that 111, there it is. We can see it right there. So good, it did find it. Alright, so now what we can do is do our normal db nmap, detect the version. I'm going to do an aggressive scan, detect the operating system. We want verbose 192.168.1.111. Now, of course, if you had Nessus, Nexpose, or Nexpose, whatever you want to call it, it's going to do all the work for you. It's going to tell you what vulnerabilities this thing has. Going to give you the CVE numbers, going to tell you what exploit it is, and Metasploit. It does all the work for you. So if you want to do that, that kind of takes the fun out of it, but you're welcome to do that. Doing it manually, obviously, you're going to get more hands-on, and so if you can, do it manually like I'm doing it, and it'll give you a little bit more hands-on experience, which is, I love hands-on experience. I think that's the best way to learn, but we've been going through so much of this stuff that you should be pretty comfortable by now. Now, we can see that it's discovered a whole bunch of open ports. Now, I will tell you that Metasploitable 2 has way more open ports than this. This is quite a bit, but it actually has more. But remember that Nmap is only going to do the 1,000 most common ports. So if you would want to scan all 65,000, whatever hundred it is, ports, you would get a complete listing and a more accurate description of all the open ports. That's going to take more time. Now, when we do the version scan, this right here is going to take a while. So I may end up pausing this video. It depends on how long I keep rambling on for. But Metasploit will first see if the port's open. If the port is not open, it's just going to skip it, But if the port is open, then it's going to probe it for version information, that sort of thing. So if so, instead of trying to detect version on 1,000 ports, it's going to first detect the open ports and then launch the version scan and whatever else we did after that. So we can see that we have quite a bit here. Let's see. Now it's going to try to detect the operating system. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to wait a little bit, and we'll let this finish up. Alright, so finally the Nmap scan completed. It a lot of details to go through because we had so many different open ports. At this point you could do some banner grabbing, but Nmap did a decent job here. We can see, for example, port 21, that's FTP, and it actually gave us the version. So it gave us the name of the FTP server and the version number, which is awesome. Then it gave us a little bit other information, like anonymous FTP login is allowed. 22 is SSH, as you can see there, and it's running OpenSSH 4.7. Gives you the details there. Again, we can just go through all this, but it's doing a pretty good job telling us version numbers. It doesn't look like it gives us version numbers for everything, but it did do a decent job. Again, it even has, let's go down there, it's port 80 for HTTP. We're running Apache, gives us the version number. Awesome. Some other stuff here. Let me go down here to, here we go. We can see that there is a port 139. Oops, where was it? Where did it go? Port 139 and port 445 are open. Let me go up here. There we go. So we've got SMB. It detected an NBStat NetBIOS, the name Metasploitable, and so forth, and it actually gives us the SMB OS discovery. So it has Samba running on too. So port 139 and 445 are both open if we went up there and looked there. So a lot of stuff. Obviously, we're not. Looks even like they're even running a IRC server. A bunch of cool stuff. So, anyways, what we're going to go ahead and do is manually try, and I'm going to kind of give you some pointers and how to find. See if there's any exploits in here, which of course there is. I mean, we're dealing with Metasploitable, and we're in Metasploit. We're definitely going to find some exploits. So the first thing is port 21 for the FTP. Let's go up here. So there's 21 FTP. Remember this name here and then the version number, but let's just search this here. Now we could be a little bit more generic and just do a search FTP, but that's gonna return a lot of results. Now if you want to do that, that's fine, but since we know the specific name, that's what I'm going to use. So returns an exploit for Unix FTP. Here's the name and 234, which is interesting because it's version 2.3.4, which is the version that we have. And it says there's a backdoor. Gives us a rank of excellent, which is excellent for us. So the story behind this is actually a decently known FTP server, and they actually advertise as being the fastest and most secure FTP server if you actually go to their website. But what happened is their server files and everything they were compressed into a tar file, which is commonly used in Linux, and they had mirrors. They had other people hosting their files, so that so that there's multiple places to download the packages. And because if a lot of people are going to this website, the downloads might be slow or whatever the case. So you have other mirrors, as they call it, host your files. And so what one of these mirrors did was they backdoored this particular version, and they didn't tell anybody, but someone eventually found out, and that's kind of how the story goes. So there's a lot of people that had ended up downloading this, and they were instantly backdoored. And so if some of those people still have not patched this, then they're still vulnerable. They're probably out in the wild. I mean, that's pretty bad if they kept it like that. So anyways, let's go ahead and use this exploit. Unix FTP VSFTP. There we go. Just use the tab. Let's show options. Now let's set our looks like our R host is already set. Yours probably isn't. Just do a set R host 192.168.1.111. There you go. Our port 21. That's correct because it's the FTP port. And let's see what happens. Let's go ahead and do exploit. There we go. Backdoor service has been spawned. Handling. Found shell. Nice. And it says that it opened up a shell, session 1. So for example, it's not actually reporting back a shell to us, but we can still, who am I? And it gives us, it actually responds. You can do an ls, and it gives me a list of all the different folders and whatnot. So we can do ifconfig. There we go. 192.168.1.111. So we are on the system. We can look at the interfaces. We can go under interfaces file. We can do all this, all that sort of stuff. So really interesting. We got a shell though. It's a little bit different. It's not as nice as Windows is as far as getting a lot of interpreter sessions and that sort of thing. This exploit automatically will give us a shell back. But anyhow, that's how you would do that. I'm going to go ahead and Control C that. We're going to get out of that session. There we go. So let's take a look at, I mean, geez, there's so many that we can do. I guess we'll probably just do maybe 3 or 4 more. I'll just kind of take you through them a little bit. One of them, let's go to the Samba. We know that the SMB, that 139 and the 445 were open, so we can actually do. I'm just going to kind of power you guys through this. We're going to search Samba, and we're going to look for a Unix specific Samba. So here's Unix. Let's go to Multi. Multi is also good. Gives us an excellent Samba username map script command execution. This is the one that we're going to go ahead and pick this time. Let's do an info and check this out. Module exploits a command execution vulnerability in Samba versions 3.0.2 through 3.0.25 RC3. Gives you a little bit more information, but our Metasploitable 2 is vulnerable to this if we want to go back and check the version number and that sort of thing. So I'm going to use exploit. I'm going to go ahead and just paste that in there. We can actually just get rid of this exploit there. There we go. We can use that. Let's do show options. Our host is already set. Awesome. If it's not, go ahead and plug it in. Port 139, it's not going to do 445, it's going to go on 139, so that's fine. Let's go ahead and run the exploit. Awesome. And we've got our session 2 opened. We can do a who am I. We're root. Well, that's great. Uname -r. Oh, get that version information there. And everything else. Do an ifconfig. Do an ls. Awesome stuff. Now, if this is a server, which it actually is, then you can get to more interesting things like you can go cd var, and then there's going to be a www folder. Now we can do an ls, and now everything is in here. So if we actually got this in a real situation, which if you're doing it, hey, it is a real situation. It's just a very vulnerable, intended operating system, but this is pretty crazy because you have root access on their server in their www folder. You can change their index page. You can go in here, look for different databases, all kinds of stuff. So that's something that's pretty awesome. I'm going to go ahead and exit that. If it doesn't exit, just Control C, hit Y. We exit out of that. Awesome. Another one that Metasploitable 2 has, it's got the IRC, which we can look for that too. But they also have a Java, and I always talk about Java because Java always has exploits, always vulnerabilities anyways. So what we're going to go ahead and, the Metasploitable 2 has a Java, if you want to search for RMI, that's what we're going to look for. So we're going to search for RMI, or if you want to do a Java _ RMI. And of course it's going to be an exploit, it's not going to be an auxiliary scanner. But we could use the auxiliary scanner, that might give us more information. But we are going to use this one right here. It says it's excellent, so let's go ahead and check this out. Let's do an info, plug that information in there. Takes advantage of the default configuration of the RMI registry, so forth, so forth. So let's go ahead and use this exploit. Show options. Our host is already set, the R port is set, the SRV host. Now the SRV host is us. So we need to set SRV host to 192.168.1.101. And now all we have to do is just type in exploit. Meterpreter session 3 opened. Now that's what I like to see. We are in a Meterpreter session. Do a PS. Get a list of processes that are running. It's going to look a little bit different. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time with Linux because most probably you're going to be up against a Windows machine. But anyhow, this will give you a lot of different things, just a lot of different experience. And the Meterpreter session in Linux is going to be different than Windows. And so just use that question mark, and that will tell you your available things. Like we can do a record mic, screenshot, execute, get UID. It's got all that sort of thing. We can still grab a shell. We can still do a download. So you want to always do your question mark because there's going to be some things that are different. We're not always going to be able to do the same things. We can still use our execute command, all that sort of thing. So if config, that gives us that. But it's nice that we get the Meterpreter session. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that. And another thing we can do, let's see, we can do a PHP one. We can also do that IRC that we saw earlier. So let's go ahead and let's just do the IRC. I can search IRC. And here it is right here. Similar thing happened with this. Someone had backdoored it. It's a real IRC server. And it's also open source, but someone backdoored it, and similar situation happened with this. So we can use this exploit. Show options. Our R host is already set. The R port is already set. Pretty easy. Do an exploit. Let's see what happens here. It looks like it's just kind of sitting there. Still connected, so not sure. It may have something to do with it couldn't resolve my host name. There we go. It just took a minute. And let's see what we got here. Who am I? We're root. Awesome. Do our uname. See what we're dealing with. Cool. Do an ls, get a list of files that we've got. Awesome stuff. So anyways, let's go ahead and do a control C. We'll exit out of that. I guess the last one that I'll show you guys that comes to mind is, let's see, we already did the FTP, we did the IRC, the PHP one. So let's do that one. We're gonna search for PHP_CGI. There we go. As you can see, it also has a rank of excellent. There we go. Now, obviously, I'm just for recording purposes, I'm just kind of doing all of this for you. It would be way more time consuming if we actually went and grabbed the banners to try to determine the version numbers, and then eventually we would come to this conclusion. So I'm just kind of speeding the process up for you, kind of taking the fun away, I guess. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and use this exploit. Show options. All of this, you can leave all of this alone. Yes, 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 yes. Everything's already set. We don't need to change anything. Now, if you need to get that R host correct, then make sure you set that. Just hit exploit. Awesome. Got our Meterpreter session. Do a PS. Get a list of processes. We can get UID. See what we're running as. Server username. Sweet. We can get PID to see what we're running as. All the same sort of thing. Again, use that question mark. You'll notice that we can't do, like if we try to do a get system, it doesn't know what get system is. So your Windows and your Linux Meterpreters are going to be different. So anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this. And that's pretty much it, guys. If there's no 0 days, we need to detect what's on those ports, what versions are running on those on the vulnerable piece of software. See if there's anything going on, and then try to exploit it from there. Which is what we just did. I just did it kind of quickly as I could, anyway. So anyhow, guys, I appreciate it. Appreciate you going through this course. I'm not sure how many more videos we have to go, but we have pretty much covered everything that I've wanted to. So I may do a couple bonus videos, but I want to thank you for taking this course, and I hope that I'll see you again in the future. Thanks, guys.